Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin. My guest today is Dr. Roberta Satow. She's a psychoanalyst, a speaker, and an author, and we're going to be talking about her novel today. She is Professor Emerita of the Department of Sociology at Brooklyn College and the City University of New York. Dr. Satow speaks and writes about issues of aging, gender, and mental health. She has been quoted in the New York Times, the Oprah magazine, on ABC News and other national media platforms. And she writes a PT blog called Life After 50. Roberta has been the author of Two Sisters of Koyakan and Doing the Right Thing, Taking Care of Your Elderly Parents, Even If They Didn't Take Care of You. And she edited Gender and Social Life. Her most recent book, which is the topic of our conversation today, is titled Our Time Is Up, a Novel. It was published in March 2024. Welcome to the broadcast, Roberta. It's nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
So you straddle two worlds. You're a psychoanalyst, you're a novelist. Before we talk about how they intersect, why a novel this time?
This novel actually has been cogitating in my brain for many years. It took maybe 15 years of writing it and stopping. I wrote another novel in between. So it went through a lot of stages before I finally got to the point of putting it out there.
And what finally kind of made you say it's time? And that's a play on the title, Your Time Is Up, Our Time Is Up. Okay. But was it that the writing was ready, or you felt sort of psychologically ready?
I think it was a combination of the two, that I felt like a lot of the book is very, it's semi-autobiographical. A lot of it is personal. It's close to the bone. So it took some screwing up of courage to put it out there. And for my sons to read, as well as other people who know me well. So that took a while.
How would you summarize? I know it's so unfair to ask a novelist to summarize the plot, but people kind of want to be oriented into the story here. So how would you summarize it?
Well, it's really a coming of age story about a young woman who finishes college and is trying to deal with her sexuality and figure out who she is. And she goes into psychoanalysis, and the relationship with the analyst really transforms her. And the novel is the story of that transformation.
And can you characterize the transformation? And you can use names so we know who the characters are.
The main character is Rose Weiner. She's the young woman, and her analyst is Joan Wiseman. And she goes through part of what the book is about is really what psychoanalysis is about. It's about the process called transference in the analysis, and her feelings about Joan and the interaction between the two of them is the center of the transformation that she goes through.
And can you give us a little more color on transference? Because I think some of us have, I was going to say an armchair psychologist, but we know very little about what it actually is.
Okay.
Is it
transference is the process by which the patient experiences the analyst as if the analyst was some significant person in their life from their childhood. Usually it's the parents, or it could be, sometimes it's both parents or older siblings. It could be your grandmother, whoever were the most significant people in your life that we've internalized, and then we replay that relationship in our other relationships. We would do it with our friends, we do it with our spouses, and so on. But in analysis, what happens is that aspect of us, that set of feelings that we're transferring onto other people, is made conscious through the interaction with the analyst.
And is it dangerous? Is it something that you caution against happening if you're, for instance, teaching younger psychoanalysts who are coming up in the field? Do you say this is something you have to be careful of?
No, it's the whole center of psychoanalysis. It's the main tool that is used to really understand the patient, because a lot of what when the patient comes into treatment, they may have some, complaint about their marriage or about their work or something that's bothering them. But the things that are really underneath that, very often they're not conscious of. They can't tell you about it. So it's something that unfolds in the analysis through the relationship between the patient and
That's so interesting, but I thought that it can be a kind of overdone, that you can kind of have an overinvestment almost in your doctor. Am I wrong there?
Well, if you have an overinvestment, the analysis of the overinvestment would be part of the treatment. Okay. If you,
everything is material, in other words.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And countertransference, can you define that?
Countertransference is the reaction that the analyst has to the patient. Now, it can be useful or it can be dysfunctional. It's very important and useful in terms of the analyst understanding what's going on, because sometimes the only way you know what's going on is through, you're having a feeling about the patient and you don't know what it's about. And figuring out what it's about is very often very useful in understanding the patient. But if you're not aware, if you haven't, psychoanalysts have to be analyzed themselves. So your awareness of yourself and what might be brought up in you is very important.
This book is described, I think, on your website as that it illustrates the depth of the connection between the patient and analyst. Mm-hmm. That depth is, how did that lead you in a way to the story? Does that depth get complicated by how personal it feels?
Well, the only way to communicate the depth was for it to be personal, because it's an intimate process that I'm trying to describe. So in getting it, the only way of getting into the intimacy of the process was by talking about things that people generally don't talk about. I don't think I've been told that there's really nothing else that it describes what the inside of an analysis is like.
And that's what was so fascinating to me, is sort of a window into kind of the other side. Mm-hmm. You preface the book by saying, this is a book of memory of how I became who I am. Right. Some of it is untrue by design. After all, it is a novel. And part of it is untrue due to the prism of time. So I want to take the first part first. Untrue by design. Mm-hmm. Was that to protect yourself?
No, it actually was to, when I first started writing the book, I was trying to publish it. And I was told over and over that unless, you had incest with your father, or you're a famous person, or something incredible has happened in your life, I won't be able to publish my memoir. So I decided that actually I was going to do it as a novel. And in doing it as a novel, there had to be some dramatic element to it. So the dramatic elements to it, a lot of them are fictional.
Mm-hmm. And then the back half of that quote, part of it is untrue due to the prism of time. What do you mean by the prism of time?
Well, just, in having been through analysis and talked about a lot of these issues many times before, they change, so your experience of them changes. So the issue of perfect accuracy is not there. It's I'm viewing it as a woman, late stage life, talking about my experiences as a young woman, 18 to or 21 to 25.
And just because it's better coming out of your mouth than mine, and some of the personal threads that run through this, can you share at least one or two?
Yeah, sure. Certainly the whole relationship that I describe between Rose and her mother is very much the relationship of me and my mother. So even if the details of it aren't exactly accurate, the feelings of it are definitely accurate and personal to me. And I did teach at a yeshiva. I did teach at Brooklyn College. So though all of those experiences were from my life. And
what about Joan, the therapist?
I actually, my analysis was with a woman named Joan, not Joan Wiseman. Again, I think could say that the feeling, the tone of it is accurate, but my analysis was much, much longer. This is much more truncated. The kind of the insights we had in a book, you have to get to it a lot faster than you do in reality. So that was fictional.
And how impacted were you by Joan's illness and death?
That was for the dramatic impact.
Okay.
She did not get sick during my analysis.
Okay, but do you feel like this book in some way honors her memory?
Yes, it does. It honors the transformational aspect of my analysis with her, because it really was transformational for me. I mean, there are a lot of analysts have to go through analysis, but I don't think, in having taught analysis for many years and supervised people, not everybody is had as transformational experience as I did.
And can you at least characterize a little bit how it was so transformational?
Because I had a very intense transference on her, and my relationship with my mother, and my conflicts with my mother, and my whole issues of separation all came out in the analysis. And even the title of the book, Our Time Is Up, it's many levels to it, but the most obvious one is just that at the end of the session, the therapist says something like, "Our time is up for now." And that always came as a great painful message to me.
I will admit that I have been in therapy myself, and I would often end it myself. I haven't been in analysis, but I would end the session myself because I had so much anxiety of the doctor ending it and feeling kind of, stung by, how can you end this? Don't you want to talk to me forever? I just want to read a little excerpt here, which I love. This is from the novel itself. "Why don't you tell me what brought you here?" Joan asked, tilting her head slightly. She was asking for a presenting problem. I knew that because I had been planning this since I was 12 years old and had recently reread The 50-Minute Hour. We can discuss that in a minute. Joan sat smiling, just enough to indicate interest, but not so much as to seem too eager. I noticed she had dimples. Quote, "In my junior year, my friends were all paired off with boyfriends, and I felt lonely," I said, slouching in the bottomless chair. "Yes, I want to see you 3 times a week," I said. And there was just something about how instantaneous that was. I want to see you 3 times a week. Can you just describe that scene a little bit for us? What's happening there for you?
Well, I think I arose, and this was true of me. I was very eager to get. I knew about psychoanalysis. I had a friend whose father was an analyst, so I knew about it from that. I also had read all these books. I had read Freud from the time I was, in junior high school. So I had spent a lot of time thinking about this and wanting to be in analysis. So. That intensity was true.
And let's go to your Jewish threads through this book, because they really run all the way through it. You mentioned that you taught at yeshiva. Just give us a little bit of your Jewish bio, and then how would you say that Judaism intersects with your personal story in this novel?
Okay. The first part had to do with the yeshiva. I needed a job to pay for my analysis. That was true. I say this in the book, and that was actually true. And the only job I could get was, I had been a waitress in college, but I saw this ad actually for a teaching job at a yeshiva. And so
where are you, Roberta? Locate us. Are you
okay? I was living in the Village, and the yeshiva was in Williamsburg. So I went there, and I had the interview. All of that is accurate. What's my description of the yeshiva? But they were ultra Orthodox Jews. So I had to, and I was brought up in kind of my mother was kosher. We had a kosher house. We lit candles on Shabbat. Shabbos it was in those days. My parents, though, they didn't really know anything about religion. They didn't go to temple except once a year or to go to the synagogue. to services. So it was I was very amused by your interview with your mother when she describes going, having being in a kosher house, but every Sunday going to either Lundy's or a Chinese restaurant. And that's what we did too.
So it all runs in the family.
Right.
And I'm just reading one more excerpt. My parents are old and they have suffered so much. It makes me wonder, how could God have let the Nazis kill 6 million Jews? That's a tough question. I smiled in recognition. I had often asked myself the same question. Give us a little background on that exchange.
Well, this was the young women at they were girls. They were in 8th grade, and they were among the best students I ever had. I taught at Brooklyn College for over 40 years, but I never enjoyed teaching as much as I actually did at that yeshiva, because these 8th grade girls were very, very smart, but they had grown up in a bubble basically and knew nothing about the rest of society. So the girl that I was describing, her parents had been in the camps. I think they had both lost spouses in the camps and found each other after that. So it was a kind of Judaism that I didn't know very much about at all.
And one more excerpt, finally, just because this section it was resonant. How could I bring a Japanese American from Hawaii back to Brooklyn to meet my mother? He wasn't Jewish. He wasn't even white. This is Kenji. He's from Hawaii, and his parents work on a pineapple farm. My mother would start to yell and cry. She'd be nasty. She'd say racist things to him. I can see her wailing about what her friends would say and what her sister Gus would say. She was never concerned about my happiness. It was not a consideration. But then I don't think she ever thought about my father's either. Are you able to give us a little window into whether there's a personal aspect to that?
Oh, yeah, that's very personal. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you say how? That's
very accurate.
Can you say how?
Well, I mean, my mother was very uncomfortable with people who weren't Jewish. We lived in a neighborhood that it was kind of on one side of the street, it was Jewish. On the other side, it was Irish and Italian. And she really never had anything to do with any of the people on the other side of the street. It was, she only spoke to the Jewish people. So we were, in fact, it was so isolated that when I went to college in California, and it was a shock to me. I thought of Los Angeles. When I thought of California, I thought of Los Angeles. I thought lots of Jews there. I'm going to go there and I'm going to be really comfortable. And I was totally shocked, that nobody was Jewish. And a lot of the words that I was used to using, for example, I didn't even know that they were Yiddish.
Wow.
Until people didn't know what I was talking about.
How do you diagnose why your mom was just so focused on like Jews only?
I think she had a very limited background. I mean, her family, her mother lived next door, her sister lived next door when I was little. Her social life was with her sisters, so she really wasn't exposed to anybody outside of her Jewish cohort.
So what would you say, Roberta, was the hardest part of writing this? Was it the personal aspects that you were kind of wrestling with, or were there other hurdles for you?
No, I think the hurdles were not the personal part. The hurdles were the things about writing fiction. I'd never written fiction. I'd always written academic articles. So being able to create a plot, and dialogue that was interesting and would keep people involved, and being able to stretch out the story and give it in doses through sessions, keeping the timing straight of this whole process was very, very challenging.
In terms of just the discipline of fiction, it's very different, obviously, than academic writing, nonfiction writing. Yes. How have you educated yourself, sort of sharpened that skill? Is it by reading other novels? Are you in a writing group with others? Who gives you feedback on your manuscript?
Right. I was in a writing group for many years, working on this book, as well as Two Sisters of Koyukon, as well as the book I did before that, Doing the Right Thing. So my writing group played a very important part. And then I took a fiction writing course at the 92nd Street Y, and then went on to have various editors read my work and give me critiques of my work. And friends of mine who were writers, or some who were analysts, read what I was writing as I went along.
Great. And just finally, what do you hope people take away from this book? What do you want them to feel or experience reading it?
Well, I think a few things. I mean, one is I want them to really feel the process of this young woman developing, okay, and understand and really feel the evolution that she goes through. And that's one thing. The second thing is I really want people to understand what psychoanalysis is about, because I think a lot of people, when they hear the term psychoanalysis, they think of Freud in 1895. They think of a silent analyst. They don't really think about it in terms of the relationship between the patient and the analyst at all. I don't think most people understand what the process is. So it was very important to me to be authentic in what it's really about.
And this idea of being on the couch, which is another cliche, but isn't it true that it is better to be on the couch?
Yeah, it is, because I think for most people, being on the couch does allow you to free associate more. It allows you to get into your own head and not be thinking about, what the analyst is thinking so much.
And the fact that you're not looking at the analyst, am I right?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the analyst, you're focused on what is she thinking, what is she feeling, what is she, judging.
And then I guess just to leave this with this moment of anti-Semitism that we're in, as this book exists and obviously has a lot of real Jewishness in it. Mm-hmm. What's your reflection on that and this book in this moment?
Well, I think a lot of being Jewish is not about Judaism. It's about, I thought in your discussion with your mother, the discussion of lying and shandas, that it's not about, that's not in Judaism. It's a shared culture that especially Eastern European Jews developed. So a lot of what I experienced as being Jewish didn't have to do with Judaism, really. It had to do with a subculture that I was steeped in, and couldn't even tell what the boundaries of where I ended and it started, because I was so merged in it.
Roberta Satow, thank you for this conversation. The book is called Our Time Is Up, a novel. I encourage everyone to get it. Can they get it on Amazon? I want to give the right information. Absolutely. That ubiquitous Amazon always comes in handy. It's been great to be with you all for In the Spotlight, and I will see you next time. I'm Abigail Pogrebin.